is 12:02, so we're going to go ahead and get started. As you know, today we are going to be talking about navigating the architecture licensing process and exam day. I don't know if you know this, but on Monday, October 7th, it was World Architecture Day. So happy Architecture Day to everybody on the webinar. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a brief overview about who PPI is, for those that may not know much about what we do. We've been around since 1975, so coming up on 50 years now. And we have trained millions of engineers, architects, and also interior designers to pass their professional licensing exams. So that's the FE and PE exams on the engineering side, the ARE for architecture, and the NCIDQ for the interior design exams. We do this through reference manuals, both print, e-textbook. We have instructor-led courses. We also have a learning platform that has a quiz generator and practice exams and that sort of thing. So we are that kind of one-stop shop for materials for engineers and architects. As you probably know, exams change quite frequently, not just on the architecture side, but also engineering and interior design. So one of our biggest roles is to make sure that our materials are always up to date with the current exam specifications, formats, that sort of thing. We also, all of our materials are authored and reviewed by a team of expert authors and subject matter experts. You may be familiar with David Kent Ballast. He's the author of the ARE 5.0 review manual that a lot of folks use in their studies. We are his publisher, so that his book is available as a web book in our learning platform, along with those quizzes and other practice things that I had mentioned before. Okay, so before we get started, I wanted to go ahead and allow our wonderful panelists here to introduce themselves. We'll go ahead and go alphabetically, and we'll start off with Andrea Alvarez Barrios.
Thanks so much, Jenny, and thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Andrea Alvarez Barrios. I'm a licensed architect here in Austin, Texas. I have about 7 years of experience in the industry, 3 of which I've been working for a single-family custom residential firm in Austin. We also do some commercial, small boutique commercial work. I have had the opportunity to be the leading projects all the way from schematic design to construction administration. And I recently got licensed last July, and it was very exciting. It had been a personal goal of mine for a very long time. And I guess I decided to get licensed because I wanted to be exposed to all of those phases of design. The test forces you to look at architecture holistically, and that was intriguing to me. It felt that going through that process, I would be able to become a well-rounded professional, and it certainly was like that. And I'm very excited to be here and hopefully share some of my experience and help some of you in your journey.
Thanks, Andrea. And Andrea is actually going to be teaching our first live online course coming up in November and December. We have a practice management course, so she'll be the instructor for that, and she's really excited for that. All right, next up is Brook Boughton.
Hi, yep, I'm Brook Boughton. I'm located in New York City. I'm recently have been licensed in New York State. About 2 months ago, I received my license, and I did my last test back in June 20th. So it's only been a few months for all this process to happen. And then I had my master's in architecture from Pratt Institute, and I did my undergraduate at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. I'm also a visiting assistant professor now at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. I also work at SU11 Architecture and Design. It's a small firm. It's really just myself and the owners. And we work on some small residential projects, but I've worked on civic projects in the past, higher education, master plans, things like that. So I've had about 6-7 years of experience, and yeah, I guess the reason why I was really wanting to get a license was it was also a personal goal of mine. And to be able to have the flexibility of opening my own firm one day is definitely a goal of mine in the future. So becoming a licensed architect is really the only path to do that.
Cool. Thank you, Brooke. And lastly, Ilana Spindel.
Hi guys, I'm Ilana Spindel. I went to undergrad at Washington University in St. Louis, and then I did grad school in Los Angeles at University of Southern California, and now I work doing high-end residential here in Los Angeles. I'm licensed in California and also Washington. So if you guys have any questions about taking some of those supplementary exams, please let me know. I decided to become licensed because I also want to own my own firm someday. And I also just wanted to get these tests out of the way while I was still kind of used to studying from being in grad school. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. And I am going to be the moderator for today. My name's Jenny Sly. I've been with PPI since 2012, so 12 years now. I've worked in a variety of roles across marketing and product and course operations. I manage our instructors. Oh, looks like and yeah, I'm going to be the moderator for today's panel. So let's go ahead and get right into the first question. First of all, why become a licensed architect? Ilana, I'm going to go ahead and start with you on that one.
Great. I think becoming licensed gives you just a lot of flexibility and a lot of upward momentum in your career. I think a lot of people decide to get licensed later in life and also decide not to get licensed at all. You can still go very far in your career without being licensed, but you'll get there faster, sooner if you are licensed. I think one thing that's really tempting is you do get a bit of a pay bump and more consistent pay. We have these very expensive educations. It's great to be able to pay them off a little bit sooner. But also being able to go from one job to another, you have this, official seal of approval essentially. So if you leave a firm, it's easier to go into kind of a higher level, kind of that like sideways mobility or move up into a different firm because it's not just your experience, it's this also, you have this official designation. For me, studying for the exams was really useful, made me better at my job. You start to ask questions and kind of pay more attention to your job while you're studying. I didn't know much about contract law, and then all of a sudden you're studying for practice management. I start asking my managers, like, what is the contract fee structure for this exam, for this project? Or you pay more attention on a construction site. You started seeing, okay, I've studied what this looks like. Okay, what does it look like in real life? And I think it's really useful in setting yourself apart from your coworkers because you're paying more attention, you're learning faster than they are. And also then when you finally are licensed, you can move on, you can move up really fast.
Awesome. Brooke or Andrea, do you have anything to add?
Oh, I was just gonna say that I completely relate to that Elena was saying about asking questions because the exam, like I was saying, forces you to look at the profession holistically, everything from the beginning of the project, like just the contract and that administration aspect, all the way to the construction. And you just suddenly, out of that curiosity, begin to ask questions. But in that process, it forces you to become more prepared to encounter any of the situations that come along with being an architect. And even if in your job every day you don't get exposed to these things, just by going through the exam, it makes you just be more proactive about your own learning, and it makes you sound better at your job because you begin to be interested in things that you wouldn't otherwise perhaps be interested in, and that overall just helps your growth. As for like why become a licensed architect, at least the way that I look at it is there's internal motivations. Like for me, it was I desired that boost of confidence of just knowing that I know what I'm doing, and this designation nobody can take that away from me. Um, and certainly that internal boost of confidence and being exposed to all of the aspects of being an architect certainly was a motivation, but also the external factors are other types of motivation, like the better pay. People treat you, more as a manager, more like they see you more in a leadership position after you have gone through the process of being licensed, and that certainly it's something that you need as you grow in your career. You need to get that confidence out of somewhere, even if it's like through the designation. So yeah, that's pretty much um, how I would describe them, all the motivation factors that play into making the decision.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a really good, it's a good point about the confidence boost and just, proving to yourself, but also others, like I know what I'm doing, because I know these exams are not easy, and they cover a
Mhm.
really wide array of things. So it really is a confidence boost. That was a good point.
Yep.
Brooke?
yeah. I mean, I was really just going to second the confidence boost. Once I passed all the exams and got that stamp, it felt, just really reassuring that I can like go on a job site and relatively know what I'm doing. At least I have a confidence in knowing what I'm doing, but also when to ask when I don't know, and ask with more, I guess, knowledge behind the subject matter at hand. I still don't know everything. We definitely don't know everything. The main thing is you know enough to be dangerous. So, I think that's, you know, getting in trouble with the contractors and everything like that, just asking them the tough questions. It, I, I feel more confident kind of having those conversations with contractors now that I have that stamp.
Does anyone have any thoughts about like when to get licensed? Like, is there like a sweet spot of when you should do that?
I
It's
mean, I
tough.
would
I think
say,
a lot of people wait a little bit. Sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I think a lot of people, I feel like there's two trains of thoughts. One is get licensed as soon as possible, get it out of the way while you're still a little bit kind of not as important at work and you can, study a little bit at work and you're a little less busy in life maybe. Some people do say maybe wait a little bit because having some experience does help you study for the exams. And you can pull on more real life experience when you're studying. So there's a sweet spot in between those two.
I think definitely there's not a perfect time. Like it's at the big, like Ilana was saying, at the beginning of your career, the problem is that you don't know enough. Maybe you don't know enough about construction, and it's very new to you, and they test you on that on the test, so it's very intimidating. On the other hand, when you wait a little bit too late in life, other factors come into play. And sometimes it's hard to when you have a plan from the beginning, say I'm going to get licensed in a year, that life, even though you have the plan, life still happens and other events, family related, work related, moving cities happen. And maybe that year goal gets stretched out and things certainly become more complicated. But that's always going to happen. And there's not a perfect time to choose to do this. You just have to make it work for you and your current life circumstances. It's certainly easier at the beginning, but so I would encourage towards the beginning. But definitely just even if it's not the process doesn't end up looking like you originally thought, that doesn't mean that you should stop, like not do it at all or stop doing it. Like just there's a lot of persistence involved in this game, and I would encourage you to keep persisting if that's a goal of yours. That's it.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the AXP in the next section, I believe. But once you're about halfway through the AXP hours, that's maybe a good indicator of like maybe when to start studying for these tests. Would be my thought.
Yeah, because you'll get that work experience, but it's still pretty early in the process. And I know at least on the engineering side, we always recommend, you take that fundamentals exam either in college or right afterward. You're still in that mode of studying. A lot of the stuff is still fresh in your mind. Like Ilana said, just personal, your life might not be, as advanced yet as far as like having a family or like a more involved job. So those are all great points. Before we move to the next question, does anyone have anything else on this? I think we.
Oh yeah. If you get licensed, you can always do some moonlighting, which is super fun. It's very common in our industry to take on personal projects, which is you have the confidence, you have, the like licensure to do it, which is super fun. Even if it's just renovating your own home, um, or a family member's home.
Mhm.
So that's definitely something to look forward to.
I guess there's also the ability to join the AIA. I mean, right now as students, you can join the AIA, but you're going to join the AIA as an architect, which there's some additional benefits when you join that process.
like putting the letters behind your name. That certainly
Yeah,
feels nice.
all along the row here.
Yeah, you have extra long business cards now. Okay, well, I know the next question has a lot to it, so I'm going to go ahead and go to that one. And I'm also going to be sharing my screen and showing some stuff on the NCARB website. But the next question is, what does the NCARB licensing process look like? Brooke, I'm going to go ahead and start with you on this one, and just let me know when you are ready for me to show those various links.
Yeah. So, I mean, the licensing process can be a little bit difficult to explain, mainly because there's a lot of pathways to licensure, and every state looks a little bit different. What I'm going to share is the most typical way, but there's definitely many ways to kind of attain licensure. But the first step would be really, getting into school, obviously, and getting a professional degree. Usually, it should be accredited by the NAAB, NAB for short. But that should be a NAB accredited degree, and it should also be a professional degree. So either a BArch, Bachelor of Architecture, or a Master of Architecture. And those are a little bit different than, let's say, a Bachelor of Science in Architecture or a Master of Science in Architecture. Those two last degrees I mentioned aren't technically, one's a post-professional degree, one is pre-professional or just undergrad. So that's an important distinction to make. But once you kind of have that degree, that is kind of one of three main kind of pillars in all this. You have your education, your experience, and your exams. So the next part would be the experience, which I briefly mentioned in the last section, but it's called the AXP. It's the Architecture Experience Program, hosted through the NCARB. And you need to have an NCARB record established in order to do this, which, if you just go to NCARB, Google search it. You can also share some of that links from that first one. But the AXP has, you need to record 3,740 hours and have that experience through 6 different kind of areas, such as project management or project development. Those 6 kind of areas overlap with the ARE tests, which we'll talk about later. But if there's also a AXP guidelines, which kind of go into detail about what kind of tasks qualify per experience area, and all these hours need to be recorded through this portal, the NCARB record, and then also signed off by a supervisor or a mentor. And all of it should be under a licensed architect. That is a key point of it. You can gain some opportunity hours. It's called opportunity O setting, which I do have some of those hours. You can record up to 360 hours, which is roughly 10% of the overall total that you need. But those hours can come from basically architecture adjacent kind of jobs, such as architecture research that you aren't necessarily doing through a licensed architect, or even interior design, things like that can fall under that category. And then finally, kind of after you have all those hours, the last piece of the puzzle would be the ARE tests, which we're going to go more into, but essentially those are 6 tests that, they're behemoths of tests. But essentially, after you've done your NAB accredited degree, your 3,000 some hours for the AXP, and then completing the 6 AREs, it's basically just some paperwork with the state that you're going to be licensed in, and then you will have your license, which is great. I mean, you can call yourself a capital A architect then. Andrea or Ilana, do you have anything to add?
Maybe I was going to mention like my own experience with the O hours. Like Brooke was saying, there's a lot of ways to accumulate the required experience. For example, like he was saying, architecture adjacent. I am originally from Venezuela, and I had some work experience back there that I thought could be useful for the counting of my hours here. And when I looked more into this process, they could count as O hours. So I had the opportunity to work for a structural engineering firm, which is architecture adjacent very much so. All the buildings need structures. And those hours were able to count towards my overall goal in the different areas, especially in the coordinating, because seeing that side of the picture as a consultant, as a structural, allow in theory, and I believe this is true, allows me to coordinate better, have smarter conversations with engineers as now working as an architect. So that was one type of experience I was able to get. So I would encourage you to look into like all types of experience, whether it's research, maybe you work for not necessarily an architectural firm, maybe some other type of maybe sustainability firms, things like that, and gather all of this because they do help towards completing the overall goal. It takes a lot of years. So if you can make use of everything that you got. And yeah, that was pretty much it.
And I know
Um,
NCARB has a licensing requirements tool, so I have that up here. So I'd definitely recommend checking out the ncarb.org. The whole website is very helpful, but there is a tool here, and I don't know if anyone wants to talk about if you have any experience using this or.
Mhm.
Um,
I
oh
can
gosh,
briefly
it's
talk about
definitely.
it. Sorry, Ilana, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just saying it's a little confusing. For me, I ended up calling my state, California, to get some more definite information. So if you guys read through this tool and you still have questions, definitely give them a call, whatever state you're trying to get licensed in, and they can give you some really finite answers.
Yeah, I mean, specifically for California, you do have to do a supplemental exam, right? Mhm.
Yes, so this exam you take after you've taken all of your other AREs. So if you can pretend like it doesn't exist for a little while, that's nice. Um, but it's a similar process where you have to send them your record and then they'll approve you to take the test and then you sit and you take it. One process that I decided to do to kind of catapult, usually you have to finish your schooling, you have to finish all your AXP hours before you can start taking your exams. However, if you're going to university and you want to start taking your exams early, you can go through this process called the IPAL program. It's IPAL. Not every university has it, but where I went to at USC does. And I think maybe like 30 or 40 universities have it all over the country. And they basically early approve you to take your tests. So I took a couple of my tests in the summers in between semesters, which is a little intense. But if you're already used to studying, or if you were going to take a summer class anyways, this is a great way to kind of get a couple of them out of the way. And then when you do graduate, you can keep taking your tests, even if you haven't quite finished your hours yet.
and are the exam fees, what do those look like? And I think I remember you guys saying that a lot of times your firm will actually cover the cost of those. But is it pretty expensive or?
So I believe NCARB recently changed the fees to 150 maybe. It used to be 235. Sorry, I said 150. It's 250 now. It used to be 235
Mhm.
per test. So 6 times that amount. Usually firms will pay for that. And that's a conversation that you can have even at the interview process. What are the benefits that the firm has regarding facilitating licensing, if it's a process that they're interested in and they're willing to invest in you, because they could also pay for study materials. That's something that certainly helps because these can become quite costly, especially because there are different study materials per test and different sources that NCARB recommends, which we'll talk more. But it's certainly good to have the firm's backup in that regard to help you make this investment in your personal and your professional growth.
And if you do fail an exam, is there a limit of how many times you can retake that? What does that look like?
Yeah, so you can take an exam up to 3 times in 1 calendar year, uh, and at least 60 days apart. Uh, but you can't do any more than three in 1 year per exam. So since there's 6 exams, what people do if you do end up failing, which is a common occurrence, um, sometimes people will move on to the next exam in their kind of process because there's so many of them, or you can stay and kind of study on the same one for those next 60 days. It kind of depends on, you know, how long you kind of want to take on this process, what your scheduling is. And sometimes some of the exams overlap in content. So for instance, if you're working on the practice management exam and you're planning on doing the project management, you could probably start studying on the project management exam if you fail the practice management, and then probably take the practice management shortly after you take the project management because it's all similar content.
That makes sense. And
And
I
failing
know
is super.
you say failing is super common.
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost everyone fails at least once. So I just want to encourage everyone that if you fail it, that's like normal. It's like part of the process. Some people can make it out without failing any of them, but just keep going. That's my advice.
Yeah, and this is a PSI. So the exams, if I'm not mistaken, are delivered. They're available year round, and so you just sign up for a location and a time on this page here, correct?
Yeah, well, you do it through your NCARB record.
Hmm.
That is where you sign up for the exams. They're delivered through PSI, which has PSI is essentially the exam delivery partner, and they have locations all around the U.S. and maybe elsewhere. But I know there's a half dozen, if not a dozen, of them in New York City alone, for instance.
Awesome. I'm going to go to the next question unless anyone has anything else. Anything else on this part? Okay. All right. So the next question is, so we now know all of the, why to get licensed, how to get licensed. Now, as far as actually taking those ARE exams, the 6, um, what's the best way to prepare for the exams? And I'm going to kick this one off to Andrea.
Sounds good. So what's the best way to prepare for the ARE? Well, I will start with introducing everybody here to what the content of the test is, what each of those are, and maybe talk about a little bit about order. There's a lot of discussion on what's the best order, but I'll say there's a preferred order, and it aligns with the way that an architect basically a project comes to be, starting from very broad with practice management that is actually about everything about how to run a firm, contracts, types of firms, everything that it's on the more administration side and how to run a business of architecture. That's practice management, and that's like the broadest, where you haven't even begun to discuss details of project yet. Then there's project management. That one is a little bit more focused. It's also about contracts. I'll say too, there's a lot of overlap between these tests, but it touches on contracts, but it also tests you on, for example, timelines of projects, critical path. What does it take to actually get a project done, and schedule out all of the activities that are necessary to complete a project from a high level. And that's the second test that it typically takes. So both that I've mentioned so far are administrative. And then there's a jump to construction and evaluation, which is actually at the end of the project where it's already built, but there's a lot of administration aspects to the finalization of construction, close out, all of the intricacies of what the architect is responsible for. Those are things that are in contracts, and you have to be aware of what things to look for, what things to say and not to say on site, and behave appropriately with the contractor, and also act effectively as owner's agent. All of that is also pretty admin focused, and those first tests are the ones that you take first. Then it changes a little bit of gears, and it's more now from big scale It's the fourth test is programming and analysis. That one is about everything from the big scheme of things, site infrastructure, utilities, how are these things coming into your building? Everything from sun, wind, things like that, the big picture. Then it focuses on even more with um, sorry, I know the letters, not the actual names. Project planning and design, PPD, and similarly, project development and documentation. These two are very similar, but they're what actually makes the building. All the coordination with all these discipline systems, types of structural systems, sorry, types of mechanical systems, the nitty-gritty of actually putting the guts together of this building, not just all the variables from a high level, but actually how it gets put together. So that those last two tests are very technical, and some people separate those two as these are pretty different. As a matter of fact, to tell you a little bit about my own experience, usually it would take me about 2 months, maybe 3 months to study for the first four. These two, the last two, PPD and PDD, are so full of content that it would take about 6 months to fully feel like you have a hold of the content enough to step into the testing center. So that's I think the way that I see it, the recommended order or what you mostly will find online. However, there are other types of paths. Sometimes you in your career, in your work, um, have a just you're already working on a lot of CA and of construction administration, and you feel very good about construction and detailing. Sometimes you go ahead and take that first because it aligns with what you're doing in your day-to-day job. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. It's what works for you and what you feel confident enough. It's also a process to prepare to the exam, to craft your own confidence. So whichever path leads you to that, to step into the testing center with a certain degree of confidence, is what ultimately is going to give you success, I would say. Um, Maybe Brooke or Ilana can speak to the actual steps that to prepare for the exam, starting maybe with setting your goals.
Yeah, I can talk about that. I guess when I started, right, I set a goal for myself and then a stretch goal. So I set the timeline of, I want to be done in X amount of months or years, and then my stretch goal is half that. And I would recommend anyone, attempting or going into the exams to kind of set that before you even start studying. I would also say, spend a little while before you even start studying again, researching online what these tests are all about. I mean, if you have taken the initiative to be here, you are kind of doing that, but there's still even more information out there. So, I recommend looking at the NCARB forums. There's good kind of tips and tricks on there. And then, we recommend you to take the live course here, but there's lots of different methods of studying. Figure out what you can do and how you study best. Is it reading? Is it watching videos? Is it being in a group setting? Is it there's whole different ways of studying, right? And then as you study, I would say that one of the big things is kind of showing up at first, kind of showing up, and then because if you don't show up, like as in just starting to study, right, is the hardest part. You can always say, hey, I'm going to start studying on Monday. Monday rolls around, you kind of don't do it, and then, okay, then maybe you start Tuesday, then you skip Wednesday, and then you skip Thursday, and you're not really doing much studying. So what you really need to do is show up, even if it's for a small amount of time, 20 minutes at first, 30 minutes at first, but build that habit so it turns into, every night you're putting 2-3 hours in, or maybe, you're not able to do it at night. Maybe it's happening, right after work or something, or even in the morning. That's, you got to really find the time and the place for you to study. And I think that part is really, really important. Ilana?
Yeah, I think the best way to start I think we're used to studying in the way that, you have your textbook, you read it, you make your notes. For these tests, you really need to find some quizzes and take as many of them as you can. Obviously, we all use PPI to study. There's other resources you can use too, but just find one that works for you and if there's 1,000 quiz questions, take them all twice, even if it takes you 6 months, because part of the trick of these tests is how they ask you the questions. You might have studied, contracts and feel familiar with them, but the way they ask you the questions about the contracts is very specific. And the only way you kind of practice that is by taking quiz questions. NCARB also has a free test for every division. They have a free full-length test. That's a really good way to gauge how you're doing. I usually would take that one towards the end of my study, maybe 2 weeks before I was scheduled to take the actual test. But that's the best way to practice kind of the format. It's not just multiple choice. They have some fill in the blank. They have some drag and drop. They do some kind of funky things with the case studies. So when you want to practice kind of that, you have to take the free test. But even if you fail the free test, that doesn't mean you're going to fail your actual test, because I think they make the practice test a little bit harder and they grade it a little bit harder. So even if you're failing, even if you're only getting 60s on your practice test, you still might pass the actual exam. So don't let that discourage you. But yeah, just take as many quizzes as you can.
I'm gonna second that. I failed every single practice test,
Yeah,
and then I
every
passed
single one.
on the first try all the tests. So it's a great resource to say diagnose where you're at and help you target your studies, because some of these tests have so much content that it's going to be really hard to address to at some point after you have done your general review of the content. Okay, what do I focus now? I have maybe 2 weeks, 1 week. What do I invest my time on now? And that's where the quizzes are really useful if you use them to hone in the areas that you need to get better. And then for the day of, you're actually prepared. Another thing that I guess helps a lot with quizzes and also with the NCARB exam is to recreate the exam conditions as much as you can. So if you have already scheduled your test and you know it's at 8 a.m., wake up 1 week before at 7:30 a.m., sit on your desk, recreate those conditions. Make yourself use the tools that they make you use in the test, like for example the whiteboard. That changed due to COVID. There's the option of doing online testing and in-person testing, and for everybody to have needs to use the same tool, they added this whiteboard, which is basically paper on the screen, and it takes a little bit of getting used to, and you don't want the test day to come and find or be intimidated by the fact that you don't know how to use this tool in the moment of when you already have a ton of other pressures on your back. So go easy on yourself by getting yourself familiar with all of those conditions, even the interface. Eliminate as many variables as possible, so on the day of you only focus on the content and getting it done, I would say.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go to the last question here because I know we just have 10 minutes left. But we have prepared for the exams. Now it is exam day. What does that look like? Brooke, I will go ahead and start with you.
Yeah. So, we were just talking a little bit about that calculator and that whiteboard, right? So one thing you can do to prepare for that would be taking the multi-divisional practice exam that NCARB offers, that we were kind of talking about before. But, even before you schedule anything, I would say, and before you even study, I would take that multi-divisional practice exam as really just meant for you to get use of the tools and the question types, the hotspot, the drag and drop, the multiple choice, things like that. So I would take that right away. But when you show up to your exam center, they recommend showing up 30 minutes early, and I would always do the first one available in the morning, which was always 9 a.m. starts. And I found that if I showed up 30 minutes early, I would be the first one in line, even though they wouldn't be even open yet. And then I would basically be the first one they would talk to. They would get me in the test center, and I would be sat down first. And I found that to be really helpful, and would also be before my actual start time. So it would actually be starting around like maybe 8:45, 8:50, which, you know, there's a lot of anxiety, obviously, as you enter kind of the testing center. So to really just get into the test is a good feeling, and to end maybe a little bit sooner than you're expected is also a good feeling. You know, once, I guess, some of the exams, the shortest exam is, I have it written down here, let me find out. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes, and it's 65 questions, and then the longest is 4 hours and 5 minutes at 100 questions. They do offer bathroom breaks. You get one for the shorter exams and maybe two for the longer exams, but that kind of comes with a caveat. For the shorter exams, I think we would recommend, if you can avoid taking that bathroom break, it's a good idea, because if you take a bathroom break, every question you have viewed up to that point will become locked. So you won't be able to go back and change any answers or anything like that. You can kind of look at them, but you can't change the answers. They become locked once you take the bathroom break. So for the shorter exams, you can probably get away without doing a bathroom break, but for the longer ones, it's pretty difficult. I don't think I was able to for the two longest ones. I mean, at 4 hours and 5 minutes, it's a long one. You know, I would recommend keeping your eye on the clock. You roughly get 2.5, maybe a little bit less than 2.5 minutes per questions. And typically the case studies take a little bit longer. Not every question is timed, but if you take the entire time that you have and then divide it by the number of questions, it comes to about a little bit less than 2.5. So some questions you'll answer in 10, 15 seconds. You'll know the answer right away. Other questions, you know, you'll spend a little bit longer on. I would recommend, if you spend anything more than a few minutes, I would just kind of give it your best educated guess and flag it. You know, you can press a little button on the bottom, which flags the question, and you can move on from it, but always answer the question, or at least guess on the question, because you may run out of time at the end, and you don't want to have, you know, 15 questions that you skipped and you just didn't. That's an automatic 0 versus the potential for a point. You don't get any partial credit here. Some questions are, you know, it's what's it? Pick, you know, it'll ask like, pick the 4 best things or something along those lines, or the 4 solutions to this question out of like 6. So, you know, if you get 3 of them right, but you miss 1 of them, you don't get any credit for that. It is possible that, well, expect that, you know, you could be in a room with a lot of other people. My very first test, I was in a room, it was packed, frankly, with like 50 other people. So that's something to note. Not everyone's taking the NCARB exam. They're taking many of the other exams. You know, it's possible that during the exam, you may face a disruption such as like Wi-Fi shutting, like turning off, which like kind of pauses your exam. That happened to me. Fun fact, on my 99th question out of 100 on my last exam, kind of freaked out a little bit. But if you raise your hand, the proctor will come over, they will help you out and get you back up and running. So it's just be aware that it happens. From what I hear, it happens to most people actually. And then I guess one last point I kind of want to make is they give you provisional feedback at the end of the test. It is 100% accurate according to NCARB. And it's basically a pass or fail statement. You have passed this exam, or you have not passed this exam. The only thing that doesn't make it official is that they now take 7 to 10 days to basically review your exam and check for any weird errors, which basically means, did you cheat? That's what they're going through the process of, and why they take 7 to 10 days to give you official results. And then I guess one very last point would be, well, using the highlighting tool. I think the highlighting tool is so extremely important. I used it on my exam, like probably for 80% of the questions at least. You know, when you're at question 85 and out of 100 questions, you know, your brain wants to start skipping over some pieces. And there's every single word they put in those questions is pretty critical. And so what I would do is highlight the variables of the questions, such as, are they looking for an answer that applies to like a winter condition or a cold climate versus a hot climate? It would be a completely different answer. Or a solution meant for the summer, it would be a completely different answer. So those variables that are in the question, highlight all those. So when you reread the question, you quickly can see, oh, this is for the summer. I know based off of that this answer applies to that question. Andrea, Ilana?
So you do have the option to take these at home, but I would suggest not doing that. I've heard nothing but horror stories. If you have to, you broke your leg and you really want to take it, like you can try it, but there's just so many variables when you're home. Is your cat gonna jump on your computer? Are you gonna spill water on your computer? Wi-Fi is gonna cut out? And they judge them really strictly. So you have a proctor watching you, and if anything's suspicious, they'll cancel your exam. And I've heard, nothing but horror stories about them going poorly. So if you have the opportunity to take them in person, I would really suggest it. And also just get your mind in the zone. You're not sitting in your living room. You're sitting in this very official testing, and I think it helps you concentrate as well. So please take them in person.
Everyone's head went like this when you said take it at home.
No, it's just something I agree completely about the variability aspect. There's so many things going on already on that morning or that afternoon that you're going to take the test, to add the layer of perhaps technology failing, or even unknowingly someone in your household going inside the space that you're taking. Like Ilana said, they just all those things, and you might get a fail because of something that was not in your hands. So I'll say too, like, the going into the although I 100% recommend going into the testing center, when you go into the testing center, you have to go in with a certain mindset. So even if unpredictability happens in the testing center, you will have someone there to help you, your proctor. It doesn't all fall on you. But even if they do happen, like being with 60 people, or maybe your PSI software glitched, right before you get into the testing center, like, be clear on that, because we're telling you that today, but also on the test, remind yourself that that's a possibility. So if it happens, you keep your calm and you're still able to complete your test, because ultimately that's your objective. What else can I say? I guess just random tips that I would suggest. Don't be intimidated by the case studies or by an unusual format of questions. For example, with the case studies, a lot of people talk about, oh, I failed because of the case studies. Not necessarily. Case studies, first of all, they're graded the same. They are also 1 point. So they're just another format of question. And they're really nothing more than reading the material that the test is already providing you and knowing where to find the answers. If you prepare during your studies enough to know where to find answers, then the case studies are not as intimidating as people make them sound like. What else? Some people suggest to take a look at the case studies first, and then go on to the rest of the test that is easier. If you find that works for you, that's fantastic. You have to, through the process of taking these multiple tests, you'll find what actually works for you. I didn't do that trick personally. I'd like to leave it towards the end, because in my brain they were already pretty different. So I reset my brain. Okay, now I'm doing case studies, and that worked for me. But if the way that you function, it works for you to take them first, that's certainly an option, and you just have to find what is it that makes you feel better, and that I guess, like, it's not a detriment to your confidence as you take the test. So yeah, it's all about confidence. Just whatever, as you prepare, as you take the test, if you enter the test with that confident hat in your brain, just do it. Also, another thing I was going to forget about confidence: don't change your answers. If you like Brooke said, like, you flagged, you took your best guess, change your answer, put an answer down when you review, unless you have a great reason that you know for a fact that you did something wrong or that you thought about it originally wrong. Unless you know that, don't change that answer. It's proven that your first guess, it's probably right. So if you're an overthinker like me, don't do that. It doesn't help.
Those are great tips. Thank you.
I was just gonna say, it's generally considered that the first couple exams are a little bit easier, so definitely use those first few exams as ways to kind of figure out how you best take the exam. So you kind of have, you're used to it by the time you get to the tougher, more technical exams.
Okay.